Very, very interesting panel, and we have a lot of major lenders on this panel. Let me start with you, Ms. Goyal. Just to give us some context, what has been World Bank's involvement with green hydrogen over the past few years, and especially what is the work that World Bank does in India in this space?
Sure, thank you. The World Bank has been engaged in green hydrogen space for about like 4 to 5 years now. In fact, I think more than 5 years now. So it began, when we started to realize that industrial decarbonization is going to become a big thing very soon because a lot of movement was happening, for instance, in maritime sector, in RF&BOs, and et cetera, et cetera. So we started with an analytical piece of work just to inform us that where exactly the green hydrogen would deepen further. And that assessment showed, of course, it was a long time ago, I'm talking about 5 years ago, that some of these sectors which were more promising were refineries, long-haul trucking, fertilizers, etc. So we then started to look deeper across the value chain, and immediately after that, when we were working on this, we thought there were a lot of other, missing pieces of puzzle that we need to look at. So we also developed a GIS tool in which, we could figure out that where the green hydrogen hubs should be coming up. And then this January 23 comes in when Government of India plans to launch the National Green Hydrogen Mission. It was a $2.4 billion kind of mission, and government needed funds. So we were roped in by the Government of India to support the mission with the $3 billion of financing. And why $3 billion? Because it didn't just stop at the green hydrogen initiatives, but it also looked at the renewable energy and the financing requirements as well. So this was given to the Government of India in 2 tranches of $1.5 billion each. One was approved in June 23, the other in June 24. And the way we designed it was not to look at a particular investment or an asset, but it was to support the policy regulatory ecosystem of the green hydrogen, because that was the need of the hour. The investments will only come in when policy regulatory ecosystem is deep enough. So the beauty of this product that we delivered in June 24 and 23 was that as soon as the government takes the policy actions, once they have complied by it, then only we will disburse. So essentially, we have disbursed $3 billion already to the Government of India. And it has gone across green hydrogen, across clean energy, finance streams, etc. So that it deepens the sector across the value chain. Beyond it, now we are looking for, I would say large-scale projects, commercial-scale projects, where we can actually help demonstrate some of the technologies. The sectors which are of immediate focus to us are green steel, green maritime, and green hydrogen hubs. So these are our immediate focus areas, but we are open to look at any other project investment that are there for the bank's eligibility. Because as World Bank, we look at public sector investments. Our sister organization, IFC, looks at the private sector investments. So together we are trying to cover the space amongst both of us.
Right. Thank you. Ms. Jhawar, again, the same question. What has your company been doing in this space? What is the Bank of Baroda planning to do, if not doing already?
Okay. So first of all, thank you for having us over for this lovely and great panel and making me a part of it. Bank of Baroda's focus towards sustainability has been very high. Of late, in the last 2 to 3 years, you will find that Bank of Baroda has done a lot of things in the sustainability field. So, a green deposit being one product which has been our highest selling product, and Bank of Baroda proudly tries to, mention that we are one of the leading banks in the green deposit space. That gives us an edge, and it tries to help us in understanding that this is not what is it. We want to go for more and more. So recently we've also come up with the sustainable finance framework, which basically focuses on investing in all these green areas, and it highlights the green taxonomy, which we internally have developed in the lines of the ministry's taxonomies of it. The sustainable finance framework has been able to help us to raise around 10,000 crores of green infra bonds, which has been one of the first ones in the space of this banking industry in India. Now, said that, with respect to green hydrogen, we have done a few pilot projects, as pilot projects is something which is going eight, as we have heard since the morning, that pilot projects is something which is where the entire focus lies right now till the time the commercial space is developed. So a few pilot projects is something that we have targeted. We are also developing a transition framework wherein we can, detail the different taxonomies and the KPIs through which we can assist the various hard to abate sectors for going in for this, sustainable linked loans, etc. So there also we will be able to tap and target this green steel, green ammonia and stuffs like this, which will help in, decarbonizing the real economy. So that is something which we are also looking for it.
Right. Coming to Ms. Kumar now. Ms. Kumar, please tell us about what PFC has been doing in this space and what are your plans?
Yeah, thank you. So PFC generally basically has been focused on power sector over the last decade maybe, and now we are venturing out into newer areas, and we have funded a green hydrogen project as well. And we are also looking at various projects in the clean energy space, and being a public sector entity, and we are, of course, we are in line with the government's initiatives to carry on this energy transition. And in this space, we are looking at different kinds of proposals, and green hydrogen, electrolyser manufacturing, EVs, e-buses. So we have we have ventured out in these areas as well beyond the conventional generation projects that we were doing. So of course, in the renewable energy space, we have done quite a lot, and almost say 20-25% of the installed capacity PFC would have supported in, at some point or the other. And so in the conventional solar, wind, the renewable energy space, we have funded quite many projects. Solar, wind, we would have probably supported more than 40 gigawatt of projects. And we have funded lots of hybrid projects also, solar, wind, and as well as along with BESS. We are also funding pump storage projects. So lot of stuff happening on the clean energy space, and of course trying to get into newer areas as well.
Right. You spoke that you have supported a green hydrogen project already. Can you elaborate a bit about that particular project?
Since it's just one project, I don't want to delve into the details because it's still under construction, and I would only say it's not in India, but it's by an Indian company.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Prabha, I'll come to you now. Can you tell us a bit first about the CHAKRA Center of Excellence that you're heading? And then also, what are the plans in the green hydrogen space specifically?
Good afternoon. And first of all, thank you very much for having me on the panel. So, SBI has adopted a unique and novel approach towards financing of new sunrise sectors. So, SBI has established a Center of Excellence within the Project Finance and Structuring business unit. The idea is to develop deep expertise on sectors which are coming up, sunrise sectors which are technology intensive, capex intensive and technology led sectors where like traditional banking we've been doing for multiple decades. So we don't need much guidance in that, but when it comes to these sectors, sunrise sectors, there is not much information available. The technology is constantly changing. What we have created is CHAKRA is a platform bringing together the policy makers, financial institutions, global financial institutions, all the public sector banks, think tanks, academic institutions, And the idea is to collaboratively work towards developing an ecosystem for financing of these sectors. Out of these 8 sectors, one is green hydrogen also. So we have a team of analysts who are tracking the developments in these sectors, technology developments, regulatory developments, and we go out for industrial visits also to understand the on-ground situation, what is happening in the projects under implementation. So this is what SBI is doing to bring up these sectors on par with all the other traditional sectors.
Right. Thank you. I'll come to you again, Ms. Goyal, for the next question. And since you represent World Bank, and I've been asking this question since morning, but can you tell us a bit about when you look at other markets that are coming up in this space, what is India's standing in terms of the kind of prices that we've seen? Where does India stand when you look at other markets that are coming up in different economies like Kazakhstan or Oman or other places?
I think the geopolitics has turned the winds towards us positively, in the sense that we were already positioned very much aggressively as compared to many other countries, except for some of them like UAEs and others. But our renewable energy is relatively very cheap, which is the substantive cost of the green hydrogen. The second bigger cost is electrolyser. And I think there is where also we have seen a lot of manufacturing base coming up for electrolyser manufacturing within the country. So given these two important ingredients, I think India is very well suited and better placed than ever before for cracking this for the global economy. So it should not be just focusing only from the domestic perspective. All the deals, for instance, are happening for the offtake across the globe. And we have seen 2 deals coming up, announced recently in the media. But beyond that also, I think India is much more stable as compared to other countries. The policy regulatory ecosystem is much stable and investments are flocking in. The National Green Hydrogen Mission, the incentives that have been provided are, for instance, a key factor to at least bring certain players onto the board. Now, the next challenge is definitely the demand creation. When we speak to, say, electrolyzer manufacturing companies who are putting up their base, they say that we can, go up to the full capacity, but we do not have the visibility of the demand yet. So we do not want the investments to be redundant. We do not want the capacities to be underutilized. So these are some of the challenges which happen for any new technology. You talk about solar. When we were there in 2009-10, the solar was again being sold at 18 rupees. Now it's 2.5 rupees, 3 rupees. So I think we have to give some time for the technology and the manufacturing base to be set up. The important thing would be that we need to just move away from assemblers to also look inward and promote more R&D so that we are more dependent on inward-looking approaches and the material which is available within the country. The last point I would say here is that green ammonia auctions that were recently concluded by SECI are the evidence that India does stand a better chance, because on an average, the results were 30 to 50% lower than what H2 Global tender of Europe had seen about 12 months before this auction. So, we are moving in the right direction.
Right. Ms. Jhawar, let me ask you a different question. You said that you have developed your own internal taxonomy for, looking at these different projects. So what kind of considerations would you have for, large-scale green hydrogen project? How would you evaluate that?
Okay, so like any other projects, there are a lot of risks, underwriting risks, which are involved in the green hydrogen project also. So the pilot projects that we have funded, we saw and we tried to analyze those particular risks. And there are certain risks which I would say is a little different for green hydrogen as compared to the other project finances that we have done. One being the cost. The cost definitely is much higher. So the cost is something which keeps us at risk. So while funding, that is a very important component that we have to look at. The other one, so the cost component leads to the other components actually. So the other one would be the offtake risk, the demand. So since the projects that we have funded are basically the pilot projects, and basically those are those projects of the consumers itself. So they are the producers and the consumers. So captive consumption is something which we have focused upon. So then my offtake risk to some extent gets, stabilized. And I will not be able to take it to a more commercial project level till the time the stable demand is there. Because as somebody mentioned earlier, we are not doing charity, we are doing business. So the viability of the project becomes very important for us as well. That is something. Then the third would be the technology. So technology is something which in case of green hydrogen and especially in case of electrolyzers have really grown and changed over a period of time, and we still see that there are many things which provides a challenge to this technology. And though the commissioning time for a green hydrogen project is lower, but still, if the technology keeps evolving, that gives us the risk of policy. So the policy is another risk which we need to factor in as to whether we have clear set rules and standards or not. So these are basically the risks which we have evaluated and factored in while doing the green hydrogen projects.
Right. Ms. Kumar, would you like to comment on the same question? As PFC, what are the considerations that you would look at?
Yes, so basically for technologies which have already been established and which have been evolved, we look at the risk structure separately than something like green hydrogen, which is still in a nascent stage. The technologies again just about evolving. The prices are yet to stabilize. So as Surbhi also mentioned that, what we looked at when we started with solar projects, initially we looked at tariffs which were at 18 rupees. The costing, I mean, it was supposed to be a very high cost power. Now we have, it's one of the lowest, cheapest power available. So for as a lender, I would want the project to be viable. And of course, there are two dimensions to it. One is the costing side and the other is the revenue side. So we know that it is a capital intensive project and the prices are still, stabilizing. So on the revenue side, I need to establish a revenue stream. I need to be aware of the demand and the pricing. So both offtake as well as the pricing risk needs to be addressed, and that the one way which I will look at it in a new technology would be that there are firm contracts, with maybe take or pay mechanism, because then that addresses the demand risk as well as the pricing risk, both of them. Then secondly, for setting up of any project, what are the infrastructure requirements? So all those things need to be tied up. So the availability of land, then the water requirement is also, quite a bit in this. So it's about 10 to 12 liters per kg. So that water availability has to be there. Then further on also the infrastructure for say storing or transporting the hydrogen, that system also has to be in place, for it to reach the consumers. So we need to see the entire picture, not just the manufacturing part, how it will reach the consumers. So that system also needs to be in place.
Right. Ms. Prabha, I'll ask you a different question. We've been discussing this since morning, I believe. And what is your take on the gap between the cost of gray hydrogen versus blue hydrogen versus green hydrogen? And where do you see, or since you said that you do a lot of analysis in this space, where do you see those, the gap becoming narrower in the future?
Right now, the gap between green and gray hydrogen is quite huge, maybe 2 to 3x if we look at various estimates. I see in future the gap narrowing a bit. Maybe by 2030, the renewable energy, which comprises the largest cost, about 70%, maybe it will come down by 10 to 15%. One of the other panelists also said that there is not much scope there. It's already come down from 10 rupees to 2.8 rupees or so. So still there is some downward movement that we may expect. Apart from this, electrolyzer cost is likely to go down. We are expecting, say, 30 to 35% reduction by 2030. So this is one area where the cost will go down. Also, the electrolyzer efficiency also. I'm sorry to say, but all these points have already been mentioned by all the panelists who have come earlier. So there is nothing new under the sun for me to say. But still, that electrolyzer efficiency is also one area where the cost will come down. I think for making a project bankable, these costs needs to come down, and then once it becomes viable, like bankability is not just the bid prices coming down, the tariffs discovered they're coming down. Just because the tariffs have come down doesn't mean that the project has become bankable. Other panelists also mentioned, I won't like to repeat that, but the point is that access to resources, that and the availability of the infrastructure for bunkering, etc. So all these things are there. The projects need to be looked at in a holistic fashion. Are the fundamentals of the project viable? And then risk mitigation. Does it have a robust risk mitigation mechanism? Because these are emerging technologies. The risks are also emerging. We as bankers are also coming to know and analyzing. So there is no formula for it. We go along and we find what are the risks, and then we try to find out how best we can mitigate them. So that is how I approach it.
Right. Let me ask the next question to Ms. Jhawar. Ms. Jhawar, what is your take on, and she spoke a bit about it, but what is your take on the kind of tariffs that we've seen in the recent auctions? Do you feel they're very aggressive in today's time and the kind of investments that we're talking about, or do you think they are doable and we won't see projects being cancelled in the coming years? What is your take on that?
So, see, this is a very nascent stage, I will say. So, definitely they are aggressive right now, but then as we move ahead, as we move towards more projects being commissioned, as we move towards better facilities and infrastructure being developed, etc., this is definitely going to come down, is what my take on it.
Right. Ms. Goyal, you spoke about the H2 Global's price and how our prices were so much lower in just 12 months. What is your take? Are these projects, do you think they will reach an FID stage and they will get commissioned ultimately, or is there a risk of them being too aggressive?
I think, hello, yeah, it's working. So I think what happens is that, and it's not a new story everywhere, the people have good intentions always. So they had anticipated certain risks in the future. Based on that, they have put the bets that electrolyzer cost will come down, or there will be, better efficiency level that would be available. Based on those bets, they would have bid. The same happened in the case of batteries. So when we did the very first project, solar with batteries, we saw that by the time we hit the market with SECI to, establish the project, by the time it was bid out, the prices had crashed already. And then we had given another 3 months for them to further peg on to the, downward trends. So this is all generally anticipation that the market will unfold in certain manners. If due to certain reasons, the projections don't work out as they would have anticipated, some of the projects may also have the risk of not moving ahead. However, at the given point in time, we saw recently that the agreements were signed publicly, and it was a huge event that was done out of it. So we all should hope that these projects will come. There could be some consolidation there that may happen later, that some of the projects, as we saw in the case of RE, many of the smaller companies then spun off to the bigger companies, as was also alluded in the last panel session. But my point is that at the moment, the tariffs are okay because we have the resources, in the sense the water is available. So, the green hydrogen, essentially the input is water. Now, whether they do desalination, whether they use fresh water, so a lot of, there are a lot of details behind these numbers, which none of us know what went behind the scenes. So I think the initial projects are good. Now, how do we replicate it? It's important that we understand from these projects the lessons from these projects, and then we build further and deepen our policy regulatory ecosystem to handle those risks. Which, like for instance, if fresh water is being utilized, then ideally that should be avoided at any cost, right? All these things will become bigger and bigger if we do not handle them at the right time. So it's like, I think it's moving in the right direction.
Right. Ms. Kumar, let me come to you for the next question. What is your take on the current incentives that are being offered for green hydrogen projects? We spoke about them in the last panel also, where PLI incentives are available under side scheme and ISTS waivers are available. But what else can be done to give make these projects more bankable in a way?
So on the cost side, of course, the incentives in the side scheme, these would help. And I think Mr. Goyal mentioned, Mr. Goyal or Mr. Joshi mentioned in the last panel that some of the states are coming out with some incentives, like Odisha is giving a capital, incentive to set up the project over there. So I think it's around 30%. So that's a huge amount. All these things put together, like along with the side scheme, if the state is also giving some incentive, it's reducing the capital costs. So that of course helps in the viability of the project. There could be more incentives in terms of the maybe tax incentives, both during CAPEX as well as the OPEX stage, because the project is going to operate over a period of time, and some tax incentives would definitely, help make it more viable. And apart from that, I mean, any kind of subsidy or VGF, these things go a long way to, set up any project which is in a nascent stage, and till the technology stabilizes, obviously these things would be required because of the huge capital required for these projects. So side scheme, the National Green Hydrogen Mission, of course, they're all going in the right direction. They are helping the sector. And once a few projects start coming, then, maybe there'll be more something more which comes in, or these schemes get extended, because to reach 5 million tons per annum by 2030, as of now, it seems that we might not be able to reach that target. So let's see.
Right. Ms. Prabha, your thoughts on the same question. Are the incentives enough? What more is required, either in the form of regulatory provisions or in the form of financial incentives? What would be your take there?
My opinion is that we need to take a leaf out of China's book. China has offered very, very strong subsidies for establishing its industries. As other panelists have also said, this is a nascent sector where not much has really happened. If we want really expect to achieve those targets which we have set up for ourselves, very steep targets, so it seems at this point in time, 2030 seems very, very ambitious target for 5 MMTPA, and I mean, maybe 2032, let's see how that pans out. So we definitely need support. So some viability gap funding or some contract for differences. So this kind of things would, I think, definitely support the industry. Right now, it's not really viable.
Right.
Pilot would be okay, but maybe at scale, when we look at it, when we look at large scale funding, I think there needs to be done a lot of more work from the regulatory side, the government side.
Right. Yeah. Ms. Goyal, yes.
To add one more thing over here, maybe some regulations on the demand side, because you have to create more demand, and for that maybe decarbonization, targets for some of the industries, like we had renewable purchase obligations. Maybe something can be introduced to that effect. Maybe some minimum percentage for industry use has to be from green hydrogen. So these kind of things would help the sector develop.
I agree with Priya. I really second that because till the time that is not there, the demand and the offtake will not be there. The demand and offtake will be not there, the production doesn't matter. So that's the whole point. So I think I agree with her that obligations are very important.
So just my couple of reflections on that. I am with all of them to introduce mandates or some kind of percentage. However, the mandates should be introduced at the right time, when the supply is available. If you force something on an industry and the supply is constrained, you are actually hitting the market twice, So it has to be introduced at the very right time. RPOs were introduced after when the supplies and the value chains were established in the country. So I think this is the approach that probably government is taking. For instance, Ministry of Steel came up with green public procurement. But that hasn't moved ahead to large extent at the moment. Probably it will be applicable in the next few years because there was a huge backlash from the industry. Right? So how do we introduce mandates in a very subtle manner in which the end consumers are not impacted? And sometimes this is also taboo. This is the thought process that they've developed, that if we adopt green technologies, because the differential is high between gray and green hydrogen, my end product will be also double the cost. No. When we ran one of the models for the green steel sector, we realized that if you substitute gray hydrogen with green hydrogen, the end user is not impacted in terms of the cost by more than a percentage. But because there is a taboo that if I shift to the new technologies, everything will have to be changed. Of course, there are technological upgradations, there are technological shifts that are required. But it's also important to create that awareness that if you're making an investment in a fossil fuel based, say, steel project, it will be there for next 25 years, 30 years. Will your product still be, in demand? Probably not. So life cycle cost is very important. We might, look at something like thermal power stations. We are trying to, promote them, but not yet because of renewable energy influx. So this is not the story that we should create in other sectors. We should learn. Of course, India cannot move away from fossil fuel, but we need to be having a balanced approach. And the last point is that we always talk about this differential, and differential creates demand, but we are always looking at providing incentives. I think I strongly feel that carbon cess, for instance, was a very, very important tool. It automatically penalized the users of carbon to reduce the usage. And carbon markets are going to try to attempt, but it will take a bit of a time to deepen it. So how do we bring those penalties or disincentives on the fossil fuel side will also shape the story. And last is that lot of deliberations are happening internationally. For instance, in the green maritime sector, International Maritime Organization was supposed to give the targets last year. The talks didn't conclude. This year they were supposed to come up, but Hormuz happened. So we do not know if their focus would still be on the decarbonization or to look at the bigger challenges. But globally, the story is turning around. So I think this is all like a recipe for decarbonization. It's us, how we want to pitch ourselves. Of course, definitely in the commercial manner, because the scale, as Joshi ji mentioned in the last panel, scale is extremely important to bring the economies to the country.
Right. Ms. Prabha, let me come to you for the next question. Over the past maybe 3-4 years, there have been so many announcements of developers setting up these large 1 gigawatt plus green hydrogen projects, so many MOUs being signed. But when we talk to developers in our meetings, and we always hear that, financing is not available. So could you maybe elaborate that a bit, that, we have over here financiers ready to finance those projects, and we have developers willing to set up those projects. So how do we what is your take on solving this issue where money is available, people are willing to set up the projects, but it's not happening on ground at the scale it should?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things which are holding back the developers as well as the financiers. So, although the announcements have been, the very large number of announcements have come, but on the ground project implementation have been very thin. I think one of the most important things is that the technology is evolving. Maybe the developer themselves are still waiting and watching. I feel the announcements have come, but they're still watching what's going to happen in the field. Similarly, those pilot projects have come, but large scale projects, we are still waiting for them. And maybe like one of the panelists mentioned, in anticipation of how the market is going to evolve, they have taken a bet that this is how the market is going to evolve, and they have taken a bet, let me invest in this, expecting that the government or there'll be some incentives or something which will come up to make it more viable than it seems now. And maybe they're waiting for that. So from industry side, this is just a conjecture, of course, industry people will be able to tell better. From financer side, I think any project, like I said earlier, and others have also mentioned, we look whether the project is inherently viable or not. It's inherently viable or not. I mean, does the cost side, demand side, and the revenue visibility, do they all match up or not? For a banker, the most important thing is there any revenue visibility? Those long-term offtake agreements are there or not? This is the most important thing. Then is it viable, inherently viable? Then are the resources available? Water, RE, which are the main components, are they easily available? Are they, is the evacuation and integration, all those things are ready? Infrastructure, is the infrastructure ready to support this project? So all these things weigh on a financer's mind also. And I think unless we solve for all these things together, maybe we can have more of such events where the bankers come together and the industries come together and we discuss how to solve for this. And maybe we need a platform where the policy makers are also there. Because ultimately, if you want to develop an ecosystem, you need all the players. Everybody has his a bit to play there. So I think we need more of such platforms where all the stakeholders come together and then we solve for things which are not solvable by one person, one institution on its own.
Right. Ms. Kumar, let me ask you this question, then I'll move to audience comments. Is there a preference between export or domestic demand for lenders currently? Like, is there a preference between projects that are being developed for purely domestic, for catering to the domestic demand versus projects that are being developed to cater to the export markets? Is there a preference between the two?
Not really, not really. Of course, we would, of course, want to fund the domestic ones first.
Okay.
The country risk is not there. Country risk is a big thing. So, and that is not the case. And we would, of course, prefer the domestic ones. But then again, it all depends on the, I mean, if I'm comparing two projects, then viability is a point, then the risk matrix becomes different for a domestic project and a export oriented project, because if you're basing it on you're saying export based, then currency risk is there, so we'll need to take a call on that. So I think a domestic project would be preferable from that point of view.
Right. I'll take some questions or comments from the audience if there are any. Any questions or comments on the right side? No? Any questions or comments on the left? No? Mr. Ashish or Mr. Joshi, do you have any comments for any of the financiers? No? No? Sure, please. Please, go ahead.
On a lighter note, we just have a request to support the industry on financing side. It's really struggling on a financing, and probably that is a location. The system has a two kind of energies. One is the energy, hydrogen and petrochemical and everything, and another energy is the money. So We engineers are very quick in rearranging our world, but we understand the rearranging the financial world is much more complicated, and probably your support will be required on that front.
So that's what I was asking, that, the industry is ready to support the projects and financing is required. Sure.
Just one thing on that. So basically, I think over here, blended finance is something which plays its role. So it's very important that we collaborate with, because there are two types of institutions. One is profit oriented and the other one is profit making. So since we are also bounded by the NIM shrinking because of, the deposit mobilization and the capital being so scarce, etc., I think a blended finance is something which is going to work very well in this particular case. So we need to look at more of this kind of an arrangement and collaborate with certain, national and international developmental financial institutions together and then come up with such financing arrangements.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Kumar from Schneider Electric. So first of all, I think we have a very good energetic panel, Shakti Swarupa and also Lakshmi ji, right? So I'm happy to see this kind of panel. The second thing is there are few gaps which we discussed from morning. So one of them was standards, like there is no standard so everyone can follow. So we, as rightly said by Prabha, we should have the joint committee from financial, from the industry, from the ministries, and from the ecosystem players, so that we fix up the first pillar of what exactly we want to standardize, how do we want to monitor the risk, because risk pursued by the financer, pursued by the industry, will be different. So that is monitoring metrics also. The third thing is the tools for evidence, because monitoring has to be done. What kind of data and tools we want to have standardized. So tools for monitoring digital evidence. Digital India has lot many platforms which we can do. Another thing is the approach of the overall project also needs to be kind of put into a right framework. Let's say some small player wants to do, let me give you an example. A builder wants to have a kind of a small backup for his building. Instead of DigiSat, he want to use the hydrogen fuel cell, right? So there has to be a, you can say templates given to the application based templates we will have to develop. So I think these are the areas where we can work together as a team, because not a single entity can solve this immediately. And we should form small kind of committee members who can work on these different areas. So that's my suggestion.
Right. Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the audience? No? All right. Then I'll come back to my questions. I'll start this, probably the last round of questions from Ms. Goyal's side. Ms. Goyal, you mentioned that in your initial remarks that there was a $3 billion financing package that was linked to the National Green Hydrogen Mission and all of that. So if you could elaborate a bit about, and you also mentioned that it was conditional and based on implementation of certain milestones. So could you maybe explain us a little bit about how did that policy making decision happen, and what were the steps, and finally what were we able to achieve that World Bank decided to finally, give 1.5 billion and 1.5 billion in two pieces?
So I also had mentioned that when we develop any such kind of project or product, the policy regulatory interventions, once achieved, only then we disburse.
Right.
So which means that the policy actions that you have seen over last 2 years, some of that were supported by the bank. For instance, aggregation of demand. So SECI came up with green ammonia tender. Green hydrogen hub policy, it was introduced. Then green hydrogen taxonomy or the standard, it was introduced. So some of these, initiatives were, as per our opinion, important to kickstart the market. One very important recommendation and which we kept pushing till the end was to introduce mandates. But we realized that mandates at that point in time was pretty early, because what we realized after talking to the off-taker ministries is that the organic demand, for instance, the imported ammonia, if you substitute itself, is good enough to meet the supply chain. If you put mandates on top of it, it won't serve the purpose. They are a recipe for a failure. So I think we then understood the viewpoints and we proceeded ahead. So a lot of these, developments that have happened, they are all emanating from Green Hydrogen Mission, and some of those were supported by us. So it has, I think, now given us a lot of good results. We have seen tenders, we have seen auction results, they have been awarded. Many projects have seen now the offtake agreements also coming in. So this was our intention, that the policy regulatory ecosystem is deep and strong enough to attract off-takers, investments, everybody together. Just one point which I wanted to reflect on some of the points that were raised from the audience. Blended financing, for instance, one of my co-panelists mentioned. So, the bank, the World Bank, we are a development bankers, and our role comes exactly at this point in time where commercial investments are interested, but they still do not know what all risks they are entering into. Our rate of interest are not risk adjusted. So whether it's established solar technology or whether it's green hydrogen project, our risks are not adjusted, or our premiums are not adjusted to the risks. So we are best suited for this kind of technological or financial transformation. We were partners of the Government of India for solar when Solar Park scheme came up, with SECI on solar with batteries. The very first large-scale project was commissioned in February 24 in Chhattisgarh, and behind that, whatever legwork was done resulted in multi-gigawatt hours of auctions by SECI, so it provided them with that institutional and capacity strengthening. Then floating solar, so we have rooftop solar, so we have been engaged in the background through financing, and for solar rooftop, we have SBI as our esteemed partner. So we come in those sections where the commercial investments still have the risks in the gray. We help that put in black and white so that it becomes much clearer for the commercial investors, like sitting on my left, to come and invest. And it also helps in shaping the credit worthiness of the technology itself, because the demonstration effect has been created through our projects. So I think when we look at it comprehensively, we are not there for the entire duration of the technological shift or the technological curve. We come in when all these commercial investors are still there, but still wanting little more to be done. So I just,
Yeah, got it. Jhawar, let me ask you that obviously in the green hydrogen space, you said you've done pilot projects and more from a captive consumption production kind of view. What is next for you in this space? Are you also looking at methanol? Are you also looking at SAF or, those kinds of emerging fuels and technologies apart from green hydrogen?
Not really thought of it. No, but what we have been trying to do is, as I mentioned, the transition finance is what we are trying to look at. So while doing the transition finance, if we need to do these emerging technologies and invest in these emerging technologies. So there are two parts to the investment in emerging technologies. One is the financing part of it. The other one is investing for R&Ds, right? So we are definitely interested to see how we can invest in the R&D, etc., for these emerging technologies. But when it comes to financing, I don't think right now is the time when we would be looking at it, for some time at least. Till the time it's a little more developed and it's a little more established, only then we'll be able to, touch our hands on the same.
Right. Ms. Kumar, what is next for PFC in the green hydrogen space? What are your plans here?
We are looking at more of funding in the sector. Of course, as I mentioned, we haven't really funded anything in India, but now with the Odisha bid and other bids which are coming up, so we are getting a few proposals. They're still in a very initial stage. We also received one proposal for electrolyzer manufacturing. So we are looking at these things, and we'll see how it goes.
Right. And Ms. Kumar, when you're looking at these proposals or evaluating these proposals, do you, for instance, look at just one part of the parcel, which is just the hydrogen production part of the parcel, or are you looking at an entire ecosystem where you also ready to finance the storage, the transport, the water desalination project, maybe like the entire ecosystem?
Yeah. So we have the mandate to do everything. We have, in fact, funded a few desalination projects as well in Gujarat. So we are looking at the entire ecosystem for energy space, in the energy space. So anything, of course, subject to its viability and proper risk mitigation, we can look at it.
Right. Ms. Prabha, coming to you for the final remarks, what is your outlook and perspective on green hydrogen? Where do you see this heading, especially with the kind of geopolitical climate that we are in? What is your take on green hydrogen over the next few years? And what is SBI planning to do?
Yeah. So I think every dark cloud has a silver lining. So all this geopolitical turmoil has told us that we need to develop self-sufficiency in energy also. So I think when I come to green hydrogen, I think it's going to give an impetus to all the areas where we were not focusing on earlier, because the energy was easily available. Now we'll think about other sources also. So in that sense, I think India is going to do much more there. And SBI CHAKRA Center of Excellence mandate is very clear. We are looking at the entire value chain of all the sectors that we are looking at. So the projects like Priya madam also said, so we have a pipeline. There are projects, but they are at initial stages of discussion. So we are hoping that they'll come to maturity and we'll be able to fund them. So we are very positive about the developments in this field. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. On that note, maybe we can close this discussion. A big applause for our four panelists.